Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the last Tuesday in the month of January in the year 2023. Happy New Year to everybody. My name's Angie. I am with Producers XL, and you are joining and listening into The Long Term, my podcast, where we talk about kind of all things extended care. And sometimes I can get a little far reaching with that. You're probably going to hear me at times throughout different podcasts, maybe bringing in different things of disability, things that impact folks' lives, kind of just really whatever's touching my heart at that particular time or whatever's trending in that space. So I am very excited. My first guest of the year is my friend Tim Vinoy with One America. He's going to join me today. And I kind of giggle a little bit. I said, hey, Tim, let's just have the podcast kick off. We've got a whole bunch of stuff going on about Secure 2.0. Let's just kind of do a friendly banter back and forth, talk about what that is. You guys, I thought I was going to be lazy. I'm telling you, Tim kept me very honest here, and he's laughing at me because I said, we'll just kind of talk about some different things that out of the Secure 2.0, what might be impacting the extended care planning. And Tim fired back this beautiful, well thought out outline of all these things we can discuss. And I love it. Like I said, I was going to be a little lazy, and Tim's keeping me honest with this because, wow, this is fantastic, Tim. So thank you for joining me.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity, Angie, and always fun just to kind of get out and get the year kicked off. And I can't believe today is the last day, I think, of January. So I don't know where January went, but it's gone. And so we got 11 months to get our numbers done. So there we go.
Spoken like a true salesman. I don't know. It's funny you say that, Tim, because I was actually just running some production reports. It's almost like, I don't know, we're just constantly looking at what's ahead of us, what was behind us, how'd we do, how'd we not do, let's move forward. But here's what we do know, Tim, every day is an opportunity, right?
Oh, agreed. And I think the opportunities as we see it from a One America perspective, we got a lot of wind in our sails right now. We just last week we were at our sales meeting in Indianapolis and had some good conversation there with kind of where we're going, what we're looking at, what we're seeing from a One America perspective, maybe even a little bit about what's going on with the industry. So I think those are things, and probably for your listeners today, my guess is they have clients that are dealing with all of these conversations or dealing with these issues either themselves or have clients that have family members. So I think this is a great place, the topics that we can cover today. And as you're right, I did send you a list, and I said we don't have to cover all of them, but I think it's all timely and as I call it, topical, so to speak. So I'll let you pick one, and then we'll just kind of open that one up.
Tim, I think I kind of want to run down it because I think you're right. And the reason why it was, I think, relevant for me to find One America to be on my podcast and the Secure 2.0, right, was because you guys are life long-term care combo. So from a life insurance perspective, a lot of times, maybe when we're thinking about Secure 2.0, we don't necessarily think it has a lick to do with long-term care insurance, which maybe in the overarching scheme of things, it doesn't. But there certainly are some things that are going to make the clients, your prospects, the folks out there, as our consumers start to hear about things that they don't realize it's impacting them, but it's a way for us to take that opportunity and have that conversation with them about, kind of what does that. So let's talk about this first one you have with regards to qualified funds. We get excited when we see the number million or even billion, but Tim, trillion?
Yeah, so there's $39 trillion when we start looking at what's inside of what we would call qualified funds. And that's including your 401ks, your IRAs, the 403bs, the anything that's tax qualified. So that's the marketplace. And so there's lots of money in that. I think of that $39 trillion, 19 trillion is in IRAs. So think of individual IRAs. And the audience that owns the majority of those assets of IRA, let's just focus on IRAs just because it's a simple number to kind of think about, are those between 55 and 65. So that's a great audience, a great marketplace to start thinking about. They're that audience, 55 to 65, if you think about it, what's the age of their parents?
Yep.
If you add 25 years to that, we got parents that are now, in their 80s to 90s. So they got this front row seat to that conversation you mentioned, Angie, that extended care planning. So I think that's a great place to start. And part of the Secure Act 2.0 that's out there, we know that the RMD, that required minimum distribution age, is increasing to 73. So that's just going to kick that can a little bit further down the road with respect to that.
Absolutely. That's one of the changes. And I think maybe a lot of folks are thinking, okay, well, then my clients really aren't going to have, that's one more year forward that they don't have to take their required minimum distribution. But nonetheless, the conversation is still to be had. They still need a plan. And Tim, what I love this, right? So if you're 55 to 65, you look forward 25 years to your parents and what they're going through and what your grandparents went through. And I'm a big proponent of taking a good hard look at your own genetics. And at 55, and I can say this because this is the exact situation I'm in, I no longer have to worry about a kid at home. It's not that you don't worry about your children, but I'm not paying for her day to day, right? She's a responsible adult. She's out of college. She's working a job. She just got married, all those things. So a lot of times what we think about at that age demographic, these folks have now stopped driving their car down the road, looking in the rear view mirror at the kids in the back seat. They're now looking forward at what's ahead of them and their future with their spouse and their plans for their next year's. So that's why it's so critical that if you think about where all that money is sitting, if a house is someone's largest asset, their qualified accounts are their largest assets, it does behoove them to take a consideration or at least have that conversation about how can we fund for our extended care plan.
Yeah, and I think that's key, Angie, when you start thinking about the funding, right? This is just one of many funding sources that's available. And with One America, we do have our I call it the IRA funded option. So that's a nice way. It does multiple things. And I think that kind of gets into that, I call it that first sales idea, right? So that the question you might want to write this down or think about when you're talking with your clients or prospects, the question would be, will you be in a higher tax bracket, a lower tax bracket, or the same tax bracket heading into retirement? And everybody has their thoughts on what that's going to look like. But if I have that the retirement nest egg, that qualified money that's there, a lot of people haven't thought about, maybe I got some excess money, maybe I could repurpose that. Is there something I could use to fund the asset care or the extended care plan? And I think that's a great door opener to say, let's talk about your IRAs. Let's talk about your retirement. I think it kind of goes hand in glove with each other as far as that conversation. So if you're an advisor that's doing retirement planning, the natural question would be is if you're going to have extra money maybe, or maybe you're not going to use all of those qualified funds. This is a great conversation for a funding, how do we fund for it? So, and that would be I look at my target ages for that group, that audience, 59 and a half is for sure, that's a good place to start, all the way to mid 60s. In fact, our sales statistics would say that people that buy these products are around 64, 65, retiring, getting close to retirement, and they've done that analysis for retirement planning, and they've done a great job of saving. Maybe they got a little extra there they don't need to take out, or they're going to defer it. They're going to kind of kick that can down the road a little bit with that R&D, and maybe we could tap into a little bit of that today. So that was the idea number one, or
Well,
sales idea.
Tim,
So,
I like that, because when we start thinking about folks that are, 64, approaching 65, a very, very heavy conversation that they need to have and understand is, what are their Medicare choices? Are they currently on group? What's their group size? Is it over 20? Is it under? Because a lot of folks don't realize that Medicare choice can impact them financially if they do it right or if they do it wrong. Are they going to delay their Part B? It all comes down to pennies and dollars, right? And so a lot of that is, a lot of folks don't realize, and I don't know if I'm under the adage that you necessarily save money when you go on to Medicare. It just looks different, but all of that goes hand in hand, because really, sometimes when you make that Medicare decision, no matter if that's at age 65 because you're aging in and you're going in right away, or you're going to delay it and go in at 70 or 72 or whatever that is, the finances around that looks differently. And that's when the conversations are had also around, should be, Medicare doesn't pay for long-term care. Medicare doesn't pay for chronic illnesses, and there's triggers inside of that. So all of that lends itself to that wonderful conversation to be had. What we have to be careful of, and what we as the advisors need to be careful of, is don't overlook the health of your clients, right? Because that field underwriting and that underwriting at the front end of this, right? Their health is really what buys their insurance policies, whether it's life, disability, long-term care, Medicare, obviously aging in, that's guaranteed, but we need to be aware of that as well. And so that's why we see younger issue ages on long-term care planning solutions, because you've got to be healthy to get there and to buy that coverage. So I think all of that rolls together.
right. And I think there's a myth out there. You talked about the Medicare Part A, Part B, or whatever. I think I'm going to probably misstate the quote was, there's a lot of people out there and they believe that Medicare is going to provide them the coverage, whether mom needs care for 10 days or for 10 weeks or for 10 years. And that's incorrect. So that the educational opportunity for us to have with them is by far a great opportunity for us. So kind of gets back to I'm going to push down to my second idea there. And these are just, kind of the questions we ask our clients. So if from an advisor perspective, the next question is, who is this money ultimately for? Who is this ultimately for? Whether it's an IRA, non-qualified. But if we can find out, why did they save, and then who's ultimately going to be the benefactor, I think that there's some opportunities. In fact, we had a case late last year where dad was in his early 80s. Mom had passed, and so there was it was dad's IRA, and he was trying to figure out some legacy ideas, some planning ideas. And with the IRA funded option, the IRA owner, in this situation, dad, who's age 80, does not have to be the insured. So he was able to use dad's IRA. He would have to pay the tax, which that's fine. But the insured was his son and daughter-in-law. So there was a big legacy opportunity there. The son was going to ultimately get the money anyway. But he was saying, is there something I could do today to reposition some of that money? I'll pay the tax at my tax rate and ultimately have this nice legacy plan for his son and daughter-in-law. So there's you may think about some clients in your book of business that are maybe, let's say 75 to 85, that have larger IRA balances. Go back and ask that question: who's this ultimately for? And maybe they have a situation where they would like to start giving some of that money today in the form of these asset care type products. So once again, another way just to ask the question, opportunities come out of that.
Tim, I've got to repeat that, because I want that to resonate very loud and clear, what you just said, because I think that's a huge sales idea that could be missed. You're saying that dad, who owns the IRA, doesn't have to be an insured or a beneficiary. He's just paying for it out of his IRA dollars, insuring his son and daughter-in-law, which is in turn going to protect his grandkids if they need extended care. That's generational love right there.
Right. And I think the opportunity there is, of course, dad, in this situation, dad was uninsurable, going back to your health issue, but um, the legacy opportunity, of course, with the second to die policy, there was life insurance going to be passed on if care was not needed. It freed up some cash, the cash flow for the son didn't have to worry about, how he was going to fund his plan. And it was a great solution for that. So yeah, I guarantee you probably have a couple clients in your book of business, if you're dealing with that age group, and legacy becomes a big part. I always say when I think of my parents now in their 80s, and I will tell you that they are focused on legacy. It's the efficiency and the effectiveness of moving an asset from one generation to the other. And this is a great example of how we could do that.
I absolutely love that. And I don't know, maybe it's tugging my heartstrings because I have a funeral to attend tomorrow, but I got to tell you that's pretty neat. That's really pretty neat. I hope some of you are writing down some of the clients that you're thinking that could be a reason to call them. That's pretty cool. Hey, Tim, what about inherited IRAs?
Well, and that's kind of where the son was the client that we started out with, and he was going to say, ultimately, I'm going to inherit my dad's IRA, and we said, would your dad be willing to kind of think about doing something today? But for those that maybe they're not going to have that conversation, and ultimately someday the son or the daughter inherits mom or dad's IRA, whatever that is. So the Secured Act 1.0, of course, changed some of the rules around that, and it's now a 10-year acceleration, right? So we got to get the money out in 10 years. And so once again, that IRA funded option. And I should mention that our bonus right now, for those that are familiar with our product, even if you're not familiar with it, call up Angie, get an illustration to see what it looks like. But we provide a 25% income bonus on that IRA or that annuity. So dad puts in or dad transfers an IRA of 100,000, or somebody inherits that Aunt Betty's IRA for 100,000, whatever it is. We add 25%. We're going to start with $125,000 that's kind of our starting point for our funding source. So nice way to think about satisfies the 10-year rule for inherited IRAs. Of course, inherited IRAs, we don't have to worry about the under 59.5 penalty, so that's nice. And that 25% bonus is a nice add-on, so to speak, as far as the dollars and cents, and moving from a tax deferred to a tax-free. Of course, all of the benefits inside these products, the LTC benefits are tax-free, the death benefit is income tax-free. So we're going to really move it into a tax-efficient product.
Absolutely. And I love all this, and we've not really truly touched upon. I know one of your next points that you have here, and this is the one that actually did come out in Secure 2.0, about being able to use qualified monies without the 10% penalty if you want to put it or use it towards extended care planning under the age of 59.5, which $2,500, a lot of folks go, well, that's just nothing. That's not going to cover the cost of anything. But you know what? It's something.
Yeah, I think it starts the conversation, right? I think part of this is that as much as we want Congress to do the right thing, it's a place to start. It may not be where they end up at, but I can think back to my own policy, what we call our continuation of benefits rider, the COB rider. That's a tax qualified. So I think my COB charge is $1,600 for the policy that my wife and I have. So if I wanted to pay for that out of my IRA, I could have, and I'm under 59.5, I could take the money out and do that without penalty. So that's once again another, I think it's an educational opportunity.
Agreed.
To inform your clients on what's in there, what's not in there. Now this part here, the way I read the rules, it's 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years after.
So this is a 2026 sales idea. So we'll do one of these podcasts in 3 years, and we'll say, Angie, do you remember 3 years ago we talked about this? And so, but
yeah, Yeah,
think,
so you're
yeah,
going to get the 2,500, but not for 3 years. So get excited about it, but contain that excitement for a few years. Gives us some room. I like to be glass half full type of gal, right? Gives us some room for improvement. You never know. There could be a secure 2.5, 2.1, 2.7. Who knows, right?
right. Well, and I think that once again, there's a lot of stuff kind of, yeah, my financial advisor sends me a little newsletter once a month, and you kind of browse through it a little bit. It talks about some of the stuff in there, but I always wonder, how does that apply? And of course, I'm in this business, so I'm a little bit more listening to it, and we get stuff from our home office and other companies. I read the, kind of what's going on because it impacts our business, but not everybody's doing what we do. So I think that I go back to this educational opportunity to be that subject matter expert in your community.
Yep.
Be kind of that thought leader.
Yep.
With respect to some of the ideas we're talking about today, because I believe that those will pay big dividends, not only today, but down the road for you.
Right. And Tim, I stop and think about my listeners. Most of the folks that I work with, long-term care insurance, extended care planning, chronic illness writers, long-term care writers, this is not what puts food on the table. This is not their area of expertise. And to be honest, sometimes, I'm going to be very transparent. There are times where things come flying at us from an informational standpoint so fast that it's even hard for me at times to take it all in, assimilate it in my brain, and then come to the conclusion of, okay, this is impactful. This is what we should. So I guess what I'm saying is thank you for those of you that tune in and listen to the podcast or listen to it, on demand when you can, because I understand that you can't take everything in that's coming at you from the industry. You have many other things, but there are some exciting things. So really, if anything, listen, if something strikes your fancy and you're like, hey, I know a client that's relevant to, or this could be something I could say to Bob. That's really all this is for, is really just to kind of help you tee it up, think of the clients in your book of business, or maybe ways that can position you in your community to come out and say something different that other folks aren't talking about, especially if you're a property and casualty agent. What's going to set you apart from the other agent down the street or on the same block? Is it just brand recognition, or is it the fact that you kind of are well-rounded and you can talk around a lot of different topics? Which, Tim, the next one is actually kind of a little near and dear to my heart, with the retired public service employees, right? For law enforcement, firemen, chaplain, ambulance crews, all of that. That one's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's been out there for a while. We kind of forget some of this stuff that Congress has given us. This was part of the Pension Protection Act of 2006. So, it's not new. And in fact, I kind of forget about it every so often. But when we were talking about kind of prepping for this, we were talking about the $2,500 in the Secure Act too. And I said, well, we already got $3,000 a month. Or I'm sorry, $3,000 a year for the retired public service employees. In fact, if you want to know more about that, or if you're working with anybody in that public sector, law enforcement, firefighters, that kind of, those people are eligible if they have a 403A, a 403B, a 457B. They can take up to $3,000 a year if they're retired. But for that, and that would offset some of that continuation of benefit, that COB premium that we have inside of our contract. So there's opportunities there that we kind of forget about, and maybe those that are listening today would say, hey, I know somebody that is down at the city that I could get an audience working with those. Maybe it's the fire chief that I could do a presentation with. My uncle was a fireman for 20 some years after he was in the military. So he would have been a candidate for this. So there's people that we kind of forget about. Once again, what it does is it piques the interest. And if it does that for us, what it's going to allow is that maybe they take advantage, maybe they don't, but I think it helps you start the conversation. I'm going to maybe start with that, is the conversation has to be, and maybe this is what we do for the conversation.
I agree. And, a lot of times we say, and I mean, I'm kind of immersed in that public servant, just because my husband, and of course he's got lots of friends that are firemen in our community. And we think about, and you're like, but they have to be retired. Keep in mind, police officers, law enforcement officers, firemen, they're typically not working in that job to age 70. I mean, it's a physical demanding job. A lot of them, once they get to 60, a lot of times, unless they're, in the upper management, a lot of times they're kind of wanting to maybe retire from that occupation and maybe find something else that they want to do for a couple of years or whatnot. So don't think that, oh, it's a retirement benefit for them. They're going to be too old, they'll be unhealthy. Not necessarily the case, because they do have a tendency to retire younger than other occupations. So I love that. Thank you for the reminder on that.
Well, and the other part of that, Angie, is they could buy the product today still as an officer, a law enforcement, or a fireman. And then when they do retire, right, maybe they're 60 or 59, they buy it today. And then when they do retire, that door opens up. So there's an opportunity down the road to figure out, it's a funding source, once again, and they can take that money out for a tax-free distribution. So there's the opportunity, is that I can take $3,000 that I deferred, and now I can move it into take it out tax-free for that. So there's some opportunities there as well. So
I love that. Hey, let's talk about the not the crazy state of Washington, because that doesn't sound right. The the state of Washington and how that's actually moving down to other states.
Yeah, it's interesting, because that's kind of on for those that are maybe, let me back up for a second. If you're not familiar with what happened, a little over a year ago, the state of Washington said, hey, if you don't have a tax qualified long-term care policy of some sort, you are automatically in this new payroll tax. And the payroll tax basically helps fund Medicaid, right? So it's a Medicaid issue. And so it covers it had a very limited coverage. So the state of Washington, we got a whole bunch of business, and everybody in the industry. It really took the industry to its knees with respect to all the business. And there was a lot of problems with that. And then right now it's they kind of delayed it. So they're still trying to figure that out. But I think what other states have found out, and at least what we're seeing, is that other states have been kind of looking at this going, there's a way that we can tax people to help offset the current Medicaid shortfall, or the current Medicaid expense that we have, kind of because it's paid by those it's a payroll tax, so those that are working,
actively working.
Yeah, so they have to be actively working. And the states that right now, there's 13 states. I saw something when I was kind of putting all this together. There's probably more than that, but there's a fair amount of people that are looking around at this. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
When. You're right. You're right.
I think that's what you have to be thinking about. And once again, can I be proactive with my clients? Can I be proactive in my community? Can I be seen as a subject matter expert as it relates to this? And so the states that currently, there's 4 of them right now that are pretty well down the road, which is
they are well down. Yeah.
Michigan, Minnesota, and New York. Now, we don't do business in the state of New York, but it doesn't, the awareness of these products and what's going on, is that we're going to hear more and more about it. Washington wasn't a one-time deal, so it's out there. And so opportunity for you to be proactive with your clients, to say, hey, we need to have something. What is going to be the plan?
Yeah. And Tim, I didn't mean to cut you off on that, but I wanted to reiterate the states that have kicked that can pretty far down the road. California, guys, that's That's a large state with a large population base. So California, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, all very prominent states. And, some of them are setting some precedent with some rules and guidelines. And then you've got other states like Alaska, Colorado, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Missouri, Montana, North Carolina, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Utah. If I didn't mention your state, it doesn't mean they're not looking at it. What you probably aren't aware of behind the scenes is that your NAIFA chapters are heavily involved, and some other association, insurance associations are heavily involved in kind of trying to keep their finger on what's going on and what the states, just because your state wasn't mentioned doesn't mean that they're not looking at this and having conversations about this. They've just not gone to the process of saying, let's take a formulated look at this. Let's put together a council and let's have that conversation. But those 4 big states we mentioned in the beginning, California's they're meeting very regularly. They've got actuaries on board. I mean, it's like you said, it's not a matter of if, it's when. And so in knowing how it played out in Washington, what you don't want to do is you don't want to wait until your state says it's a thing, it's here. Because I have a timeline, and it's fascinating. In the state of Washington, because the actively at work were being forced to buy insurance, or they were going to have to pay this payroll tax, the carriers just slowly dropped like flies. They had so much business, which you think is a good thing, but you have to take a good hard look at what is that you're getting, right? They all were individually underwritten, so they had to be healthy enough. So think about the expense at the carrier level and the time that they have to push all those applications through. So it's really not one of those things that you want to wait until your state says green light, go. You kind of want to be prepared and know that, hey, there's great solutions out there today for extended care planning. Maybe I should start talking about it, because I don't know, Tim, if you have the success, but I've never sat down with a couple or a single person and had a conversation about extended care planning, and they looked at me and went, yes, ma'am, sign me up, pull out the paper app, pull up the electronic app, let's do it.
Well, normally if they are that excited, there's a health issue that they just came from the doctor's office, and they're excited because they see a little bit of smoke coming from the.
There you go. There's smoke in the chimney. You're exactly right.
Got some problems, but I think the other part of that is, and I think we as an industry, and I'm going to, One America is not alone in this, because I think the issue we're going to run into is that if, depending upon how the final regs come out from these different states, we took different measures in Washington, and eventually we pulled out, we stopped. And I will tell you that I believe, and this is my opinion, okay, so this is not One America's stance, but this is what I believe will happen, is that if it's not favorable, it's not conducive to good business within the industry, our companies will just stop immediately. There's not going to be we're going to give you 4 months to get your clients in there. They're just going to say we're done today, because we know we're tracking, we're watching that Washington business as far as we call it retention in the business, how much they renew, because we've had a first year cycle on some of that.
Yep.
Some of it's good, some of it's not. And I think we're looking at from an industry perspective. So I think the more proactive we can be, and I think here's the opportunity. I'm going to jump to the opportunity with this, because we're kind of probably up to our timeline, but education. I mean, we kind of, if anything, out of the theme of today was, what can we do to be a little bit different in my community? And we have 2 educational workshops. And the good news is that I have 18 counterparts. I have 18 colleagues all over the United States. We call them regional sales directors that are willing. They'll come out and do the workshop for you. You don't even have to. You mentioned somebody that's in property casualty, or maybe their business is Medicare planning, or maybe they're a RIA. That's all they do is investments. But if that's the case, the opportunity there is that one of our regional sales directors will come out and do the presentation for you. We'll partner with you on that. I think host an educational event, and I think that's a great opportunity. You don't need to know everything. We'll help you. We'll even do point of sale if that's what it needs to be. So we'll help you through that process. And you really got a great team there with the folks at Producers XL, Angie, Christy, and the whole team there. They're there to help you, whether it's illustrations, underwriting, all that stuff, and great carriers. We just have to. We're excited to be a part of that. So.
Well, and Tim, that, kind of goes back to you as well. I mean, that's the reason why we do business with certain carriers, right? Because we know that you all are leaning in to help us, because there is just one Angie, there is just one Christy, and it's really difficult for us to be everything to everyone. I think if I could take a survey to say, hey, if you could have Angie or Christy come out and do a presentation for you, help you with the actual point of sale. I mean, I've got a client-facing seminar on my calendar already for an agent here in Kansas. And how many of those can I do on top of other stuff? So we like to partner with our carrier friends, and they're basically an extension of us. So we appreciate that. And we don't open that door to everybody, because we want to know that you guys are getting good quality service when somebody's out there helping you in front of your clients, because again, long-term care is not usually what all of you focus on. So Tim, I couldn't be more excited. And, we made it through everything. I knew we would, but I mean, if you could see this list, there was a lot of stuff on here, and we did a real nice job of condensing that down. And I appreciate everybody for joining me, Tim. I appreciate you. I appreciate you answering your cell phone when I have quick, immediate questions, and appreciate you. I think you're probably a little jet lagged yet, because I think you got back late last night. So
yeah, I was in a warm place yesterday in southern Florida, and I came home to
it's
8-degree
chilly
weather. Yeah, so here in Kansas City, but no, it's always good to get back home. And I'll leave you with this. It was a very interesting flight home. The family behind us we're on Southwest, and my wife and I were flying back, and I figured out it was grandma, it was the daughter and son-in-law, probably in their 50s. Grandma was probably in her 80s, maybe late 70s. And then grandkids who were probably in their 30s, right? So that's the six on the, 3 on one, three on the other side. But grandma has dementia.
Oh.
And they were asking, now, do you remember where we went? And she was having, what time is it? And where's my luggage? And so it was this conversation, and I mentioned that to my wife. We were at the carousel, and I said, I was kind of listening into this conversation. And I said, well, there's the lady they were talking to. And my wife thought it was a little child. It's like, well, no, it was a dad talking to the son. And I said, no, it was a 30-year-old grandson talking to their 80-year-old grandmother about, and I felt for the family. It was so great that they could go on their trip. They were on a cruise. And that kind of stuff out of Fort Lauderdale. But it brings home the point of I always wonder, what's their situation? Did they take grandma by choice, or was it by, necessity? Where does grandma live?
Well, and I promise you, some of those folks that came back out of that 6 family member, some of them came back thoroughly exhausted, because somebody was tasked with the constant watchful eye of grandma. And kudos to them for the love they had and taking her and what they did. But it doesn't it resonate and with what we see playing out in our own families and what we see playing out in other people's lives, and how important this planning really is. And it's not you trying to sell them anything. It's you just educating them on how it works, how it happens. How do you face this when it becomes a reality in your own family? Because when there's smoke in the chimney, it's too late. So we have to have those conversations. And just like you said, the opportunities are just educating them so they can make an educated decision. It's not always because they're going to buy, but making a smart choice, what's right for their family. So Tim, I appreciate that. Thank you for that wrap-up story. That was awesome.
Thank you, guys.
And you know what? We'll see you all next month, last Tuesday of February, and we'll same time, same channels. So thanks for tuning in. Have a great week.